Earlier this week, the very first AP Top 25 rankings came out for the upcoming college football season, and we have 5 Pac-12 teams in the top 20. This is super good for the conference, even though it's probably in its last year at being at the strength that it's at right now. The conference looks incredibly stacked. There's a lot of talent top to bottom, and I think that they're going to have an incredibly great year, but I do not think a single Pac-12 team is going to make the college football playoff. Let me explain. It's really exciting seeing how stacked the Pac-12 is looking this year, and I believe that there's 5 teams that have a chance to win the conference and possibly make the playoff, but I really don't think that's likely. The reason I don't think the Pac-12 has a chance to make the playoff is because of how good the conference is from the top to the middle portion of the conference. I mean, thinking about a conference like the SEC, where there's been 1 to 2 teams in the playoff every year since its inception, there is always one very stacked team at the top of that conference. There is not really that this year for the Pac-12. There's not a Georgia or an Alabama who is clear and away the favorite to win the conference. There's about a 4 to 5 team race for the conference championship this year, in my eyes, and there's that many teams that I think really have a shot to win this year. There's not another conference that you can say that about. Because of how talented it is, there's no way a team is making it out of that gauntlet with just 1 loss. Coming in at the number 5 spot of teams I think have the best chance to win the Pac-12 is going to be Utah, sitting at number 14 in the AP poll. Now, they are ranked ahead of 2 other teams in this top 5 list, but I really think that they don't have as good of a shot to win the Pac-12 as they have in years past. Utah did have a very good defense last year. They were the 2nd best defense in the Pac-12, just behind Oregon State. They were 2nd in rushing and total defense, 5th in passing defense, and 3rd in scoring defense. I mean, those are pretty solid numbers in a tough conference, and I think that that's going to really help them when their offense is not going to be able to put up a lot of numbers this year. I mean, they are returning Cam Rising. That is a very, very big positive for them. But, I mean, they lost Dalton Kincaid. That's going to be super hard for them to replace with how insane he was last year. Their schedule is very tough, especially to end out the season. I mean, some pretty big games for Utah this season. I mean, they are playing at home against Florida. It's a game that they lost in the Swamp last year, but I think that's going to be a pretty easy game for them to handle. They are traveling to Baylor the week after that, so that could get a little mixy for them, but I still think that they have the talent to be able to beat them. And then week 5, I believe, they are playing at Oregon State. I think that's going to be their first loss. Oregon State's a really tough team. They're going to be farther up on my list, but I think this is a very tough matchup for them. And then 2 weeks later, they have to go and play at USC as well, who's ranked number 6 on the AP poll. I think it's a little bit high, but we'll get into that in a little bit. There's no way they're winning both of those games, in my opinion. I don't think they're talented enough, and I think that those are just 2 hard environments to win in. Luckily, they get Oregon at home. Oregon has historically struggled at Utah, especially in recent years, so I think that should be a win for them. And then they also have to play at Washington. That's brutal, and that, I don't know if they're winning that. I think their best case scenario is coming out of this schedule with 2 losses and playing for a Pac-12 championship, but I don't think a 2-loss Pac-12 champion really has a shot to make the playoff unless some crazy things unfold. And also, the committee could take into consideration how good the top of the Pac-12 is. That is 100% a fact, but for the rest of this ranking, we are assuming that the CFP committee is not letting a 2-loss team into the playoff like they never have. So that's an assumption we're going to make for the rest of this ranking. At number 4, I have number 15, Oregon. Now, why do I have Oregon above Utah? I think straight away, Bo Nix is a better, more talented quarterback than Cam Rising. Cam Rising is an incredible leader. That's not disputable. But Bo Nix is going to be a Heisman candidate. He has incredible talent. He's getting Troy Franklin back. They're getting Bucky Irving back. They're going to be an unstoppable offense. They're going to be one of the best offenses in college football. That's without a doubt. And so I don't think Utah has the same firepower on offense. The Ducks are losing a lot of defensive players like Christian Gonzalez. That's a huge piece they're losing. But they got some great transfers. They got a good transfer in the defensive line. I think that's going to help them tremendously. Oregon's pass defense was a little shaky last year. I mean, they were 8th in the Pac-12 in pass defense with Christian Gonzalez, and they lost him. So, I mean, who knows if that's even going to get worse. But they were 4th in the Pac-12 in rushing and total defense, so they picked it up in that category. So if they can find some balance, if they can improve their passing defense, I think they have a lot of potential there. They did, though, lose 4 offensive linemen, and that is the main reason why I have them so low in this top 5 in the Pac-12 ranking. I think if they're able to plug those holes and rebuild that extremely talented offensive line, I think they have a really good shot of making a run to the playoff, and they're one of the teams that I could see winning the Pac-12 with 1 loss and making the playoff. But still, with their schedule and the uncertainty of their O-line situation, I don't think that that's going to happen. I also think that their ceiling with their schedule is 2 losses. But let's look at their schedule here. They're opening with a very, very soft opener against Portland State, and then they have a true test at Texas Tech. That is a team who is not ranked, but I feel like they should be. They are playing against Tyler Shook, who used to be Oregon's quarterback and transferred out. I think that's going to be a very tough game. He's coming out for revenge, and I honestly am not sure if Oregon's going to come out on top of that. Oregon's road schedule is brutal this year. They have to play at the Farm, playing Stanford. They play at Washington the very next week, and then 2 weeks after that, they're playing at Utah. That's brutal. I mean, Oregon historically has not done well at the Farm. I think they're still going to take care of Stanford, but I mean, who knows whenever Oregon plays them. At Washington is a very, very tough game for them. I mean, Washington came into Autzen Stadium and beat them last year, and if that's the case with Michael Penix returning again, I do not see Oregon going in and taking that game from them. The Utah game is going to be brutal. Oregon is historically bad playing at Utah, and so I think that they don't have a very good shot of beating Utah in that matchup. And then they are also playing USC. They get USC at home, which is good. I don't know how well that USC offense is going to do coming into Autzen Stadium to a very hostile environment. Potentially a game day atmosphere at Autzen Stadium could be a very good matchup, but I think USC's offense is going to be a really big issue for the Ducks. And so I also think that Oregon's ceiling is 2 losses coming out of this brutal schedule. Also, to end the season, Oregon's got Oregon State coming to town and taking them on. So it's a brutal schedule. I think their ceiling is 2 losses going into the Pac-12 championship. I mean, unless they hit a form that no one is expecting right now. Everyone knows their offense is going to be high-powered. People are unsure about the offensive line, and the defense is a question. If they're able to patch up that defense and patch up the offensive line, they have a really solid shot of being a Pac-12 championship contender. But right now, with what I'm hearing, I don't think that that's the case. And I think they're going to have 2 losses going into a Pac-12 championship game, even if they get there. Number 3 on my top 5 most likely teams to win the Pac-12 is going to be Oregon State. At number 18 in the AP poll, I think that is very, very low ranking for them. Getting DJ Uiagalelei is an insane pickup for them. I mean, their defense was the best defense in the Pac-12 last year. They had that side of the ball shirt away. They also had an insane running back. I mean, Martinez was incredible. He destroyed Oregon in the Civil War. So I think Uiagalelei getting some sort of a passing game is going to be insanely good for them. That's all that they needed. Someone who could actually throw the football. I mean, their defense last year was first in the Pac-12, and it was not even close. They were first in rushing defense, first in total defense, and first in scoring defense, and they were third in passing defense. That's incredible numbers. They were also the best red zone defense in the entire country. I think that is going to carry them in a lot of games this year. I think they lost a couple guys, but I mean, I'm sure those holes are going to be patched, and they're going to be an incredible defense this coming year. Also, their schedule is the lightest out of all of these teams in the top 5. And that is why I have them so high. That's why I have them above Oregon. That's why I have them above Utah. Because they are only playing 3 out of the top 5 teams that I have to win the Pac-12. They don't play 4 like all the other teams. They are playing, out of these top 5 teams, they're playing Utah, they're playing Washington, and they play Oregon. 2 of those games are at home, and the only away game out of those is going to Autzen Stadium to play Oregon, which is about an hour drive. So their schedule is by far the easiest out of all these teams. Their out-of-conference schedule is a joke. They get San Jose State, UC Davis, and San Diego State. San Diego State might be a little tough, but they get them at home. I don't see San Diego State putting up many points. Their conference schedule is extremely weak. They get to play all of the worst teams in the Pac-12. They're always going to play Oregon, and then they get Washington, they get Utah, but their draw is insanely good this year. I think this might be the Beavers' best chance ever to win the Pac-12 since its inception. And I think come November, they're going to be in a chance to where they can play for one. Going into our second most likely team to win the Pac-12 is USC, coming in at number 6 in the country. I think this might be a little controversial, but I think Washington has a better chance to win the Pac-12 than USC. And let me explain why I say that with USC. Obviously, they have Caleb Williams. He's going for the back-to-back Heisman run. He's the best player in college football. I think everyone agrees that. But where's their defense? They were the worst defense in the Pac-12 last year besides Colorado, and Colorado won one game. They were the worst pass defense, worse than Colorado, and they were the second worst total defense. This is not good. I don't know what can be done in a season to repair this defense and get them to a form that will work. I mean, all they need is for their defense to be competitive. Get them to like 5th, 6th best defense in the Pac-12, and USC 100% will win the Pac-12, I think. I just don't know about the defense. They lost Travis Dye, running back, but I think that's a hole that's fillable. He's a big player to lose, but I think there's a lot of talented running backs they can pick up, and I think they did a good job with the transfer portal this year, so I don't think that they're going to be really hurting there. Offense is not their concern. Their concern is the defense, and if they can get that plugged up, they will be fine. USC's schedule is going to be pretty brutal this year. I would say it's probably the hardest in the Pac-12. They only are playing 3 out of the top 5 best teams in the Pac-12. However, they're playing Notre Dame instead of Oregon State, basically. And so I think that's probably a tougher matchup because they're playing at Notre Dame. It's a huge rivalry game for them. So I think that makes them have the hardest schedule. And last year they had pretty easy schedule and they got almost a free pass into the Pac-12 championship. And so I think this year it's the opposite. They have a gauntlet of a schedule, and I don't know how well their team is built to be able to overcome that. And at number 1, the team that I think is going to win the Pac-12 this year is Washington. They get back their insanely talented quarterback, Michael Penix, who's going to be a Heisman candidate, and their 2 insanely talented wide receivers who are some of the best in the country. They were the best passing offense in the country last season in yards per game. They're getting all those guys back. They have a very above average defense as the Pac-12 goes, but they need to step up the run game in order to make the playoff, I think. I think what their offense right now with Michael Penix and their receivers, I think they could probably carry them to a 2-loss, maybe 1-loss Pac-12 championship bid. But if they get a run game, a solid run game, I really think they can make the playoff. I think they do. That's the Pac-12's best shot this year at making the playoff. They are going on a 7-game win streak coming into this year. That momentum is going to carry them like crazy. The start of their season is really light. They get Boise State, Tulsa, and then they got to go to Michigan State, but I think they should be able to take care of business there. Then they get Cal, they get Arizona, but then their schedule turns into a gauntlet. In the second half of their schedule, they have Oregon, they have USC, Utah, Oregon State, and Washington State. That's a brutal gauntlet of a schedule. That is really one of the only things that I think might keep them out of the playoff is, back-to-back weeks playing tough teams. They play at USC, and then the next week they travel back to Washington. They play Utah at home, and then right after that they have to travel down to Oregon and play Oregon State. And then right after that they have to go back up to Washington and play Washington State at home. Those 4 weeks are really going to be a test for them. I can see them being undefeated going into that USC week, and they could come out of the next 4 weeks with 2 to 3 losses, depending on how resilient they are, because they are going to need some resilience in order to get through those 4 weeks. But if they can scrape by, if they can get some wins out of that, they have a very real shot of winning the Pac-12, and they have a very real shot of making the playoff if they can just scrape those wins by. Overall, I think the Pac-12 conference is extremely stacked this year, but they're not top heavy. That's why they're not going to make the playoff. They have a very, very solid top to middle this year. Talent-wise, it's incredible. They're going to kill each other, though. Every team in the Pac-12 is going to beat each other. I don't think it's likely that we get a 1-loss Pac-12 champion because of how good every team in the Pac-12 is. And that's why I think we're not going to get a team in the playoff out of the Pac-12, even though it's the best, probably the most talented conference this year. It's sad. The last year we get Pac-12 football like it is and like it has been for the last 100 years. We get the best conference it's ever been, but we're not going to get a playoff berth unless we get some miracles. Unless we get, Heisman Bo Nix with an incredible defense, they can make the playoff. But they're going to cannibalize each other. It's going to be a brutal year for the Pac-12. I think a lot of fans are going to get heartbroken, but I think this is the reality of it. I don't think anyone should go in expecting a team to make the playoff out of the Pac-12. And if they do, that's an added bonus. But, we'll see how it happens. I think it's going to be really exciting to watch. Almost every week there's a very, very high stakes game for the Pac-12. And I think that's going to do really good for ratings. There's going to be a lot of nationally televised games. But I just think it's going to be hard when they're all cannibalizing each other. And this is also all assuming that every team has an undefeated out of conference schedule, which is also very unlikely. So we'll see how it goes. There's some tough matchups coming up, but I'm just excited for Pac-12 football.